Here are some true or false questions. The first one says the p-value of a statistical test is equal to the probability that the null hypothesis is true. Well, this is undeniably false. Okay? Anything that seems like a simple definition will always be false. The p-value is not going to be that the probability that the null is true, or that the null is false, or the alternative true, or the alternative is false. Any of those are always wrong. Okay? So the p-value has a very specific interpretation. Anything else is wrong. Here is the actual interpretation. The p-value is the chance of getting our sample mean, or something even farther from the null hypothesis. So something more extreme, something farther in the tails, if the null hypothesis is true. So again, it's going to be that chance of getting our sample mean, getting what we got, or something even more extreme, something even more unusual, if the null hypothesis is true. That's the definition of the p-value. Anything else is false. Let's try our next one. If the p-value is less than alpha, okay, let's stop and think for a sec. So if so that means if the p-value is less than alpha, that means a small p-value. So we would reject the null and say we have evidence for the alternative. So that's what we've been learning. Say, now let's read what it says. It says if the p-value is less than alpha, so small p-value, then the null hypothesis cannot be true. So notice we did say that we reject the null and we have evidence for the alternative, but do you think we should say the null hypothesis cannot be true? No, okay, because everything is just dealing with probabilities. So if the p-value is small, it is unlikely. Sometimes it might be very, 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 very unlikely. So it is unlikely the null is true. But it is still possible. Okay. It's unlikely, maybe very, very unlikely, but possible. And if a p-value is 0.1, we would reject the null hypothesis at significance level alpha equals 0.05. So let's see if we can figure this out. If alpha equals 0.05 and the p-value is 0.1, and I'm going to put it 0 here to make it easier to compare. So alpha is 0.05, p-value is 0.10. The p-value is bigger. So we fail to reject the null hypothesis.